Hi guys, stop the presses. I agree with Nigel Farage in a limited and specific way, as the Conservatives like to say. So what he's talking about here, which is quite interesting, is the idea of replacing the current system of government in the UK with something like the United States, where instead of having cabinet ministers who are MPs, you have cabinet ministers who are experts or people from outside politics. Now, there are some positives and negatives with this, but first, let's hear Farage's pitch.
I think the way we run our country is ridiculous. We put cabinet ministers in charge of departments over which they have absolutely zero knowledge. They'll often last in that job for 12, 18 months. I mean, barely time to get their feet under the table and understand the brief. But we're stuck in this mindset, Kevin, that the cabinet must all be politicians in the House of Commons. Why? Why? It's nonsense. Look at America. Scott Bessent has come in as the US Treasury Secretary. Never stood for election in his life, but a very, very successful businessman.
So who are some of the people you might have your eye on?
Oh, I'm not going to give you answers like that right now.
But a cabinet under Nigel Farage, you wouldn't have to be the MP for Upper Whoop Whoop. No. You could be a hugely successful businessman or woman who ran a supermarket chain for 10 years.
Or whatever it may be. But I do think, I really mean this, I do think that you've got to think a little bit more about running the public finances as if you're running a business.
No, that's a terrible idea. Okay, first of all, let's ditch that idea because businesses are about cutting costs and maximizing profit, while public services are, well, it's in the name, serving the public. So you shouldn't be, while costs are an important issue for public services, you should not be cutting costs while cutting services. Now, so let's park that. But this whole idea of replacing the current system with something like in America. Now, in America, it's a massive problem at the moment because Donald Trump is surrounding himself with sycophants. Look at Howard Lutnick, for example. These are not clever people. These are not people brought on based on merit. Okay, they're brought on based on loyalty. But the concept itself, Farage actually is somewhat correct when he's correct when he says you're bringing on MPs, they don't know how government departments work, they're in the position for maybe 12 months. And, a government in Parliament, a government that has been elected will last normally 4 to 5 years. So it would make more sense having one minister in charge that whole time and not changing all the time. Because as we know, a minister has one position, then another one has a different position on the same topic. So that's a problem. So if you replace the politicians with experts, then you can have a more stable government and you can have a more coherent message or a coherent policy because everyone's on board. The politicians normally have to look over their shoulder constantly. Okay, well, I have to hold on to my seat in Parliament. I have to maintain contact with my constituents, otherwise I'm going to be kicked out at the next election or if there's a by-election. So politicians are wearing two hats. They're wearing the hat of being an MP, but they're also wearing the hat of being in government in many cases, and that's a problem. But if you have a technocratic government, if you have an expert in charge who's not elected, who's answerable, of course, to the Prime Minister or the leader, then they can focus on just delivering policy. So they don't have to worry about elections, which is a positive, but it's also a negative because who are they accountable to? They're accountable to the leader of the party. Now, Nigel Farage would love a situation like this where he doesn't have to worry about, Richard Tice losing his seat or Lee Anderson, messing up and doing something that could damage the party. He would have complete and utter control, like the president in the US. Now, the positive also is we've seen it in the past where Barack Obama was president. In his first presidency, he had Stephen Chu, who is a scientist, a Nobel Prize-winning scientist. He was in charge of the energy department, which I think is a good idea. So you put somebody who has expertise in a particular field in charge of a government department. Now, there were some issues where he was not very good at communicating. There was also a bad investment that was damaging to him. So you're going to have ups and downs. But I think on the whole, you want to have a stable government. You want to have a government that is delivering for the people. It doesn't have to be a politician. In some ways, it might be better if it's not a politician. But you have to have a good balance. You have to have accountability, but you also have to have a government that's delivering for the electorate that put them in power. Now, I don't trust Nigel Farage because he would prefer to have people around him he can control. And if he appoints different people, then he will have full control over those people. And of course, he can sell them these cabinet positions in a way that, well, if you jump on board, you're going to help me deliver fewer taxes or lower taxes for the rich in society. So he's not going to put people in senior positions in government who are working class or anything like that, because he will want people who agree with him on economic policies. But it's an interesting idea. I don't think it's going to happen. But there's nothing really stopping Farage from doing this, because we've been down this road before. Do you remember David Frost? When Boris Johnson was Prime Minister, in order to turn David Frost from negotiator into government minister, he appointed him to the House of Lords. So this is the sort of loophole. So Farage could come in, appoint his entire cabinet to the House of Lords, make them members of the House of Lords, and then they would become cabinet ministers, even though they're not elected. That's the way around the problem. Will he do that? Perhaps that's what we'll see with a Farage government, which is a terrible thought. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated, and I'll see you in the next video.